What are on-the-fly formulas, and why should you care? Here's a character I created in GCS using mostly the GURPS Lite rules, and I will export it and import it into our GameAid in Foundry. So this is the character in Foundry. It looks about the same. However, down here in the advantages list, you can see that bad temper and overconfidence already have these buttons, these self-control roll buttons. Why was it called on the fly? Because you can create buttons on your character sheet on the fly. And yes, I used air quotes there. Let's go through some examples. First aid for tech level 3 heals 1d minus 3 with a minimum of 1 hit points. Well, it would be nice if you could just press a button and roll that. And with on-the-fly formulas, you can. So I'm going to edit the first aid skill to add the on-the-fly formula into its notes. On-the-fly formulas are enclosed in square brackets, and they follow a certain pattern, which we have documented in our user's guide. And this will roll 1d minus 3 with a minimum of 1. That's what the exclamation point does. And then it just has the comment, first aid healing. And you can see that now as a note on this character. So I'm going to export this and import it into Foundry. So I re-imported over the same actor, and the character sheet looks about the same, but now you can see under First Aid, there's this button, 1d minus 3 exclamation point, First Aid healing. And if I click it, it will roll that. Great, he healed himself 1 hit point. So that's the basic idea of on-the-fly formulas. You can add some text in your favorite character creation tool. This works, of course, for GCA also, and that text will turn into a button when it gets imported into Foundry. Okay, what are some other things we can do? Well, Alejandro has a first aid kit, and the note says that it would get +1 to the first aid skill if he used his first aid kit. We can add that to the character sheet as an on-the-fly formula. So we'll edit first aid and put in a new formula in the notes section. This funky looking formula says, roll the skill, that's what the S is, that starts with first and has the word aid in it at a +1 with the notation of kit. Since first aid has a space in it, that's just one way to skip that. I could have just said S:1. So let's export this and import it into Foundry. Here's Alejandro in Foundry, and now the first aid has 2 buttons. They're really close together, but if you mouse over them, you can see that there are 2 buttons. To make it fit, I shortened the comment on the first button, but you don't have to provide comments at all. It just makes the gameplay a little more interesting when you can see it in the chat. So if Alejandro uses his first aid kit to do first aid, it would be 13 + 1. Well, we can press this button, and it rolls just that. You can see in the chat log, he's doing his first aid skill at a 13, +1 because of the kit, and he succeeded. More, you say? Of course, I can show you more examples of on-the-fly formulas. Let's look at Alejandro's rapier. You'll notice that the parry is 11F. It's a fencing weapon, which means when he retreats, his parry is at a +3 instead of a +1. We can edit the note for the rapier to include that. So there's the formula, parry +3, fencing retreat. Of course, you don't have to provide a comment like fencing retreat, but as I mentioned before, I like to provide the comments because they show up in the chat log and everybody can see what the bonus was for. So we re-import into Foundry, and now you can see the on-the-fly button under rapier. Parry +3, fencing retreat. So let's try it. His fencing is normally 11, but with the +3, it's now 14, and oh, critical success. Wow, this on-the-fly formula stuff seems kind of neat, if I do say so myself, and I do. What else can we do with it? Well, if you look at high pain threshold, it already talks about adding +3 on all health rolls to avoid knockdown and stunning, and +3 to resist torture. Can we turn these into an on-the-fly formula that can be rolled in Foundry? Well, of course. The simplest way is just to enclose each of the modifiers in square brackets, and these will become modifiers in Foundry that you can click on. So let's do that. In Foundry, you can see that they've become modifier button, and I can click to add this to my modifier bucket. You can see this at the bottom, and now I'll roll health, see if he can resist some torture. Is this guy lucky or what? Well, that's all well and good, but that's a two-step process. You have to click the modifier, and then you click on health to roll it. Can you do it in a single button? Well, of course you can. I'll replace the modifier formulas with button formulas, but I'm going to do it in the user description. This is a free-form text area that you can edit that GCS has for advantages and disadvantages. And the sole purpose is just so that I can see it better. You can always add these in the notes, and GCA will support them in the notes. So now I have two buttons. To roll against health with a +3 because of high pain threshold. One has the comment about knockdown and stunning, and the other one about torture. But let's see what it looks like in Foundry. We've replaced the modifiers with these two buttons. Let's roll one. What are some other things we can do? Well, Alejandro attacks with a rapier, and it only does 1d impaling. He's not really that strong. He's more, a dancer, a talker, a lover. But in our world, we actually play with the extra effort rules. So when he really gets in trouble, he likes to execute the mighty blow. But that costs a fatigue point, so we will add that as a modifier to the rapier. So this formula adds +2 because of mighty blow, and it costs 1 fatigue point when it is used. So Alejandro attacks and hits, and the opponent doesn't dodge, so now he's going to do damage. He's going to add the mighty blow, and again, you can see it in the modifier bucket here at the bottom, and then roll damage. Now, if you look, his fatigue is 10 currently. When he rolls the damage, it becomes 9, and the damage is increased by 2. Hopefully by now you're thinking to yourself, hey, I could actually use this. Well, that's good, because that's why we built it. Let me add a few more on-the-fly formulas to show you what I mean. Alejandro is kind of a smart aleck, and he uses his rapier to smack people and to try to knock their weapon out of their hand. Well, the knocking the weapon away rules, they're kind of involved, and they happen to be on basic set, page 401. So it's just a comment saying knocking a weapon away with an on-the-fly formula to open up the PDF basic set in page 401. Then under acrobatics, we built 2 modifiers. We play with the acrobatic dodge rules, so if they make their acrobatics roll, they get a +2 to their dodge, but if they fail their acrobatics roll, then they get a -2 to their dodge. And the last one is carousing, and this one shows you how to base a skill off of a different attribute. So carousing is normally based on health, because you're drinking heavily and eating and looking good, I guess, but in Alejandro's case, he's more of a talker, and he will tell you stories, so the GM allows him to, on occasion, base a carousing roll off of his IQ instead of the health. So that formula will roll carousing based on IQ. And then if he's successful, he'll get a +2 reaction when rolling the reaction for that NPC. And this is how it looks in Foundry. You can see under Rapier, there's now a link to B401. And here's the paragraph on knocking a weapon away. Acrobatics has the 2 modifiers, and then Carousing has this skill roll based on IQ. So if we roll it, you can see in the chat log it says IQ-based carousing, which is exactly what we wanted. I've been adding the formulas into GCS, so they will export and import into Foundry. But you can just edit the character sheet in Foundry to add them yourself. They are literally on the fly. So Alejandro made a really fantastic public oration, and the GM has told me that now the townsfolk really respect me, and he's going to give me a +4 reaction. Well, I would like to keep track of that, so in Foundry, I will just edit the public speaking to add this modifier so I have quick access to it on my character sheet. So the GM asks me to roll reaction with the townsfolk, so I'll add the modifier, and then I'll roll 3d6. Of course, that modifier will disappear next time we export and re-import Alejandro, but it is a useful way for players to add buttons to their character sheet. I can hear you thinking, wow, this is great stuff. Are there other things I can do with on-the-fly formulas? The GM can type messages in the chat log, and if it includes an on-the-fly formula, it will be converted into a button that the players can click on. So in this example, the GM is asking everybody to make a blind perception roll. If the on-the-fly formula starts with the exclamation point, then it's a blind roll. Not everything can be blind rolls, but all skill checks can be. And this is what it looks like from the player's perspective. So Harry here is going to make a perception roll for his character, Alejandro. And being that it's blind, he can't see the results. But of course, the GM can. Of course, typing into the chat log can be kind of tedious, so to save the GM some effort, they can right mouse click on basically any roll, and this dialog will appear. And they can send this formula into the chat log to everyone as a blind roll to everyone, or since this is on the character owned by Harry, they can just send it to Harry. And the last one is they can just copy it into the chat input in case they want to add text to it. So for our previous example, the GM just could have right mouse clicked on perception and then clicked blind roll to everyone. And this button would appear in the chat log, and the GM would ask all the players to click it. This also can be useful if you have very new players, and they just aren't certain where to click on the character sheet. If the GM wants to help the player out so that they can make the attack roll for rapier, they could right mouse click on the level and then send that to just Harry so that Harry could click on that and it would roll the attack for his character. And you might be thinking to yourself, wow, this is great for the GM, but can the players use it also? And yes, they can. Any on-the-fly formula that they type into the chat window also gets turned into a button. But maybe that's not that interesting. Where it does become interesting is for chat macros. A player might make a chat macro like this, /roll blind perception check. And anytime the GM asks them to make a perception check, they can click on the macro, or they can just type the number 9. But did you know that on-the-fly formulas can call macros? Well, now you do. If you make an on-the-fly formula with /: and the name of the macro, this becomes a button that will call the macro. So to quickly execute the stab macro, I can just click this button. And you think to yourself, well, okay, what's the big deal? The macro is right here at the bottom. But what if the macro is on a different page? And then you have to go search for it. This just allows you to quickly call the macro with that name. Now, this is more for the GM, but journal entries can also contain on-the-fly formulas. So a GM might prepare a journal entry that looks like this, and when it's saved, it looks like this. And to have their characters perform these actions, they can right mouse click and send. So maybe they're in a half-moon situation, and we send that, and then we ask everybody to make a blind vision roll. So you tell all the players, click on the -5 half moon and the blind vision roll, and you're done. So now we're going to get into the advanced on-the-fly formulas. This is mainly for GMs. So if you're a player, thank you so much for watching and have fun with our system. All right, GMs, grab your favorite drink and settle in. Let me show you what you can do. This is an example of a skill tree check. When a player clicks on this, the system will determine which of these two is better for that character. Does that character have the traps skill? And if so, it will roll it, but based on IQ, not perception. Or if they don't have the trap skill, it'll just roll at an IQ -5. And it looks like this. So as the GM, you can tell everybody, please make this roll. And so you send it as a blind roll. So here we are on our player, and we click on this. Of course, it's a blind roll, so we don't know the result, but the GM does. And you're not limited to just 2 checks in the skill tree. You can have as many as you want, all separated by vertical bars. In this case, we're going to make a button that will either check fast talk or diplomacy at a -2 or IQ at a -4. Now, fast talk has to be in quotes because any skill name that has a space in it or a dash in it, a minus sign in it, has to be in quotes or it just confuses everything. So the GM could send this button to the chat log and ask all the players to click on it. To save time, I'll just do it right here. So Lady Serial has diplomacy. Bog has neither. Alejandro has fast talk. Well, now you know about skill trees, we're going to add conditional text. After a skill check, you can put a question mark and then some string. And if the character successfully completes the skill check, they will be whispered that string, "You detect a trap." But you'll notice that when it's in button form, that text doesn't appear. It is hidden. And you're not limited to one conditional text. You can actually put the question mark after each skill check. So in this case, if the character rolls traps based on IQ and they succeed, they will be whispered the message, "You detect a trap." But if they roll IQ -5 and succeed, they'll be whispered the message, "You think something might be wrong." Obviously, you don't have to get this involved with the on-the-fly formulas, but you can. And one last thing. In the last release, we added this little area right here called the quick note. And in it, you can type anything that you want. But of course, if you type in something that has an on-the-fly formula, it will get turned into a button, and you can use it during your game. The quick note isn't overwritten by imports, so whatever you type in here will be saved until this character goes away. Hopefully, this has given you some idea of the power of the on-the-fly formula. Please check out the user's guide on the section On-the-Fly Formulas to see all the things that you can embed in your character sheet or in the chat window. If you have any questions, join us on the GURPS Discord in the VTT Foundry channel, or if you have issues, go to our GitHub page and create an issue. I hope that you find the on-the-fly formulas useful, so enjoy. And as always, thank you for watching.